Maria Galli. So Maria is a qualified lawyer in both Scotland and Australia, with experiences working as a children's reporter, a safeguarder, a curator, a child welfare reporter, and a child protection officer in an education authority. She's a trustee of the board at the Scottish Child Law Centre and Ayrshire Cancer Support, and an advocate for children's human rights. As a legal officer within the Children and Young People Commissioners team, Maria advises on strategic litigation where the Commissioner gets involved in legal cases and in calling for changes to the law in Scotland to help improve the rights of children and young people. Maria is currently beginning a 10-month secondment in Jersey with the Children's Commissioner. So welcome, Maria. Great to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much, Beth Ann. I hope that there's not too much sunshine behind me in Jersey here just now, because I don't really want to rub it in. Thank you, everyone, to Sheriff Mackie and Beth Ann principally, but to the organisers of today's conference. It's been, I'm sure everybody will agree, absolutely fantastic, and we're all buzzing with the ideas of it all. I have the last lightning slot, the lightning speech today to do, and they say that lightning doesn't strike twice, but you're lucky enough to have two for the price of one children's lawyers with Alison and me. Alison has paved the way, and the outstanding work that Clan is doing along with Claire Lighthowler is just so exciting to see what could happen in terms of ensuring that children have the legal representation, the legal advice, and that their rights are being protected in all systems of justice. So I'd like to just begin, and I am going to keep it as short as I possibly can, lightning indeed. I'd like to just begin by following on Alison's analogy. So Alison talks about how we, wouldn't expect anything less of our medical professionals, that they are fully trained, fully competent, skilled, have at their disposal a toolkit of skills and resources to enable them to properly look after, save people's lives and protect our health. Now, why we don't expect the same from the lawyers, perhaps is for various different reasons. But I must say that having listened to some of the speakers earlier on, and particularly the children and young people that we were really privileged to hear from today, I was personally and professionally quite embarrassed. I was quite saddened. I was angered at hearing that any child who is attending a children's hearing or a court or is involved in the justice system at all would ever feel safe, small or unsafe or unheard in that process. Embarrassed and disappointed that Scotland has not yet achieved what we need to achieve, achieved what we need to do to make sure that Scotland is world leading on a child rights justice system and a child-friendly justice system. And that term child-friendly has been used by a couple of speakers today, and it has a particular connotation in the context of European guidelines that have been issued by the Council of Europe. And I would suggest that these are the first port of call for many lawyers who might be thinking, well, I actually don't know what I don't know. I don't understand children. I don't represent children. Lawyers are not taught at university that you need to be wary of working with children and animals in the way that actors might be taught. But we're also not taught or understood, unless you make elective decisions to learn about child development, brain development, adolescent development, impact of trauma, and children's rights in general, but in the wider human rights framework. So remembering always, because sometimes what we see is that many professionals and parents and children themselves are just not aware of what their actual human rights are if they are confronted with a situation in conflict with the law. They've got the same rights as adults. They've got the same rights as everyone else. And if we don't know what we don't know, and children don't know what they don't know, then there's a real gap. There's a real gap in the Scottish system at the moment for increasing and raising awareness, which is why the work of both the Judicial Institute, as Sheriff Craig described, and the work of Clan Child Law with Claire Lighthowler is absolutely essential in ensuring that we have a profession that we can all, as solicitors, as lawyers, be proud of, and not one that we are ashamed of. So where's the starting point? And without being too much of the doom and gloom, we've also heard of the amazing stuff that Scotland has been doing over the last few years. It's actually quite phenomenal. And note that credit should be given to all the players and actors in making that happen. Most of all, the children and young people, principally through having their voice finally heard as a result of the Independent Care Review and the promise. But how many of our legal professionals out there who may be representing children, 16 and 17-year-olds in particular, who've been defined as adults, and therefore the word child is not really entering into the equation when they're giving legal advice or guidance, how many of those professionals will be aware of the widespread policy changes, the widespread legal commitments that have been made, particularly around incorporation of the wider human rights treaties in Scotland? This is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And as Susan Craig said earlier, yes, the incorporation of the UNCRC has been halted. But if the lawyers who are representing children on a day-to-day basis at the moment, whilst we're waiting for the legislative changes to happen, are not aware of what those individual children's rights of every age under 18, in whichever context, then we really have, again, that gap in the system. We heard from Professor Anne Skelton an absolute fascinating account of what's been happening in South Africa. And when she described to me the two routes for making those changes, for making rights real for children and young people, the two routes being legislation on the one hand, and on the other hand, litigation. So part of the way that we have seen dramatic change in Scotland has been through what we call strategic litigation. Litigation that is going to change and improve the outcomes for all young children, children and young people in Scotland, in whichever setting. And I know that Clan has been involved in some fairly significant pieces of litigation, taking proceedings in the public interest on behalf of children and young people. So these are the mechanisms. Once the legal profession is trained, once, as Alison's suggesting, and that is very much welcome, once that happens, what we are likely to see is widespread awareness raising. It will just filter through the system. And at that point, we will start to see the policy coming into law, coming into practice. And that's when we will make rights real. But how are we going to achieve that? Because we also heard earlier on from Professor Kilkelly and from Professor Skelton of some of the significant rights breaches that are happening for children in conflict from the law around the world. There was the seminal global study led by the expert Manfred Novak. We are absolutely, committed in Scotland to raising the rights respecting approaches that we have. Claire Lighthowler's seminal report, Rights Respecting. These are the instruments within our toolkit, along with the international treaties and information that's available in the guidelines. So Council of Europe guidelines, UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, General Comment 24. We heard Anne talking about age of criminal responsibility in answer to a question. And that's an area in Scotland that we are still really grappling with, and that we're still not being compatible with the UNCRC requirements. So there are a number of areas like that. For me, it all centres on we need to change. The legislation needs to be changing, consequential legislation, we call it, to change the definition of a child. If we change the definition of a child to everyone under 18, as is required by the UNCRC, and as is proposed in the bill itself, and I noticed there was a question in the chat earlier around the question of age and majority. Yes, we have a patchwork of legislation across all the systems that really don't gel well together. And maybe that's the theme. Maybe that's the theme that we've been hearing about today, that the systems, the legislative processes are siloed. We're not actually respecting the rights of children in the context of the child. And Alison very beautifully put it. She said in one of our workshops earlier, a lawyer for the child, not a lawyer for the process. That's what we need. We need our lawyers. If they don't know the answer, they phone a friend. We need a team of people who can be called upon, who are trained, who are sufficiently aware and knowledgeable, just as you would in a medical setting, as Alison said. You'd be calling on the experts and specialists as you need them. And in the justice system, so the Council of Europe guidelines, for example, many people don't know that they cover all justice systems, administrative, civil, criminal, and it's absolutely essential that we understand that what that means for children, and we don't label them as being a child in conflict with the law, as opposed to a child with additional support needs in education, as opposed to a child in need of care and protection. They're just a child. A child's a child's a child is a phrase I often use at work. So once that change is made and we have a really importantly defined definition of a child as everyone under 18, we will start to see change. Similarly, definition of a young person, we have a number of definitions of that. And that's critically important in terms of corporate parenting duties and in terms of the new sentencing guidelines. So people, young people under the age of 26 need to have special protections in full appreciation of their rights as individual autonomous human beings. And so, as I say, these are the really positive things that have been happening. But we still have children in adult prisons. We still lock up children. We still don't give children lawyers for proceedings where their liberty may be deprived. We still don't facilitate children's rights to family contact. We still don't have adequate health provisions, particularly mental health provisions for children who are deprived of their liberty, or indeed who are in the justice system. We still don't have the full range, the panoply of rights that children have that are extra and special because they're children. And until we change our systems, until we unify it, until we bring all of these systems together, line them up with the policies, the promise, getting it right for every child, early and effective intervention and prevention. All these policies, the youth justice vision, are all critically essential, that they must tie together. We have to see that. And I was really heartened to see the conclusions and recommendations of the Mental Health Law Review chaired by John Scott QC. What the Law Review has highlighted is a really strong need for that unity and uniformity across the board. This echoes what was said in the promise. This echoes what is said in the Youth Justice Vision, and this would enable incorporation of all of the human rights, but particularly the UNCRC, into Scots law to make those rights real. And as Alison highlighted, and as Sheriff Craig highlighted, that takes training, it takes effort, it takes awareness raising and understanding. And I was slightly disappointed, I have to say, when the Minister said, if we conclude that legislation is necessary as a result of the Children's Care and Justice Bill, then we will legislate. For me, there is no doubt legislation is necessary. It's the legislation that will then give children and young people the autonomy and the right to make sure that they can have their rights upheld. And it enables all of us as professionals, including lawyers, to understand how we can use the law to make those changes happen, make the changes happen. So with the Mental Health Law Review, with the Care and Justice Bill, with Sheriff Mackey's working group, and with all of the other work that's going on all around it for incorporation of the CRC, there really is a hope here that, and a major opportunity that we will be able to make those effective changes. And so long may it continue. Thank you all so very much. I think there might be some time for questions, but I'm not sure. I've probably run over, so I'm sorry if I have.
Maria or Beth, I don't know if you want to.
yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Maria. That was a fantastic presentation, and I think it's one that's, I suppose, made me feel quite uplifted actually, and a bit of fire in your belly, and which I think is a good place to end today. But I'll pass over to David for his comments as well.
Well, thanks very much, Maria.